All right, everybody, we'll go ahead and get started here. Welcome to Carbide Create Live. This is being recorded so we can rebroadcast it on YouTube so everybody can get maximum benefit from it. But I really appreciate the live involvement of everyone here. The more questions you ask, the better this is going to be. If you're here for the first time, great. If you were on a couple years ago when we had these shows, welcome back. We're going to try and do more of these shows over the next few months. And this one should be up hopefully by the end of this week. If not, then early next week. If you want to reference back, I'm going to chapterize it for all the topics we're going to talk about so you can utilize it as a resource for the topics we talked about and whatever else you guys come up with as we go throughout. This is Fleming of Support right behind me here. You may have dealt with him if you dealt with Support. He's our most outstanding, I think, support person. And Fleming will be in the chat. Let me open the chat. The chat is open and it's running, so we have that in place. You can type questions in there as we go, but we'll also have a couple of different sections where questions can be asked live. Just unmute yourself at that point, and we'll go ahead and just deal with whatever you have. Our goals. We want to give you some useful information for your next design project and some inspiration. We want you to get excited about using CNC. We want to meet you where you're at on your CNC journey and answer questions and hopefully provide you some avenues to go down, some ideas for new projects. I know you'll have questions. Put them in during the show, as you mentioned during the chat. We will have 2 open question periods, one after about half the topics and then one at the very end. And you guys can bring up anything you want. As I mentioned, hugely beneficial for the replay if you ask questions. Recent content on YouTube. I would be remiss if I did not mention what we've been putting out on YouTube recently. And we've had a bowl bit video that did really well that I think should be really informative. Bowl bits are something you guys should try out. I know it's a core box bit if you really want to get specific, but if you search bowl bits, you'll find core box bits, tray bits, bowl bits, box bits. They're all basically the same thing. This video should give you all the concepts you need to get started with one of those and have success. It's really nice. It removes a lot of material, and you can also get a really sweet floor finish with that. And also, we have Winston was back on the channel with inlays. We just changed the inlay function inside Carbide Create, and that's in the free version of Create inside of the advanced V carving toolpathing. Go and check it out. Definitely utilize it. It looks awesome. We'll probably talk a little bit about this later, but that's walnut and maple and super smooth, really nice fine details, something you definitely should explore. So check those videos out. Today, we're going to talk about how and when to utilize the 3D tool. Powerful simplicity is what makes this tool really shine in Carbide Create Pro. How to prepare to use it, when to use it, benefits and limitations of that particular tool. We'll break down layers also. As you create more intricate designs, utilizing layers becomes critical for file organization. Further on, when you really start trying to make flip machined items or objects or inlays, you need to develop the habits now that'll help you when you're doing those more complicated projects. Layers is a huge part of that. Talk about how to use it. We'll dive in on the way I organize it. Of course, you may organize it a little bit differently, whatever works best for your brain. And the basics of flip machining. You just want to wrap your brain around how to flip machine. We want to give you the very basics so you can go out and try it. It can be powerful when it comes to just putting your logo on something, or if you need to go all the way through to passing through an object where you need to have cut throughs that match up exactly. The strategies to do that are pretty simple, and then you kind of just have to give it a go. So we'll go over a little bit of that, and we'll talk finally about some hotkeys inside Create, the ones I use the most, and how I utilize them. So topic number 1 is the 3D tool. And before you set about working with the 3D tool, I want you to understand this is kind of a one-off artistic tool. It's not parametric modeling. It's a lot different than some other softwares. So you need to know a few things right away. Know your stock size, know your stock thickness, know your stock location, and where you want that design to be located on that stock, because you're not going to be able to move it. You need to be thinking about this tool as cutting digital stock. So cutting digital stock is free. Normally in a 2D, you can change your profile, change the shape of something, node edit it, and completely redo it, and the toolpath will adjust accordingly. You can move the object, and the toolpath will adjust accordingly. Your toolpaths would still adjust, but the problem is the object you make will not move inside Carbide Create Pro. So you have to remake that object should you want to move it. So think of it as cutting digital stock, cutting it, and then you've created a thing in that space. You've cut the stock, you've created a thing. You're free to cut different stock, but you can't really go back and alter that thing very much. And furthermore, you can't really alter the parameters of it. And I know right now you're thinking it's frustrating. I agree. It's frustrating. It may not always be this way, but this is the way this tool currently functions. What I want you to do is think about writing down your parameters as you're making your object. Maybe take a screenshot of those parameters or use your phone to take a shot of your screen so that you have those parameters should you need to move it inside of one file or recreate that same object in another file. Approach it like a project at the machine when you're going to create your 3D object. I want you to think about being at the machine and utilizing stock and the way you kind of go about that. Same principles I think apply. You want to create your stock first, then you want to start carving it with the digital tools. Now you can cut or glue elements and material to your object, so that's kind of unique. You can add and remove parts until you get the desired look, and then you're going to apply two tool paths. You're going to go 3D rough and 3D finish. And that kind of simplified tool pathing is what makes Carbide Create Pro excel. That's where it's really going to be good, is making that organic item easily, where Fusion and other softwares are far more complex when it comes to trying to make organic objects. You need to know you're using a tool that is designed for your expected outcome. Fusion, SolidWorks, ZBrush, SketchUp, Photoshop. There's a thing called Nomad software where you can alter 3D objects. They have areas where they excel, and you probably wouldn't use a hammer to try and tighten a bolt. You wouldn't get mad at the hammer if it didn't work. Don't get mad at the software if it's not doing the thing you think it should be doing if you don't have the right tool for what it is you're trying to accomplish. So with that in mind, I want to jump into a file here that I created. So this is a file that I created earlier, and I went ahead and toolpathed. And if I show the simulation here, we'll do it in Beach. And if you haven't seen this kind of simulation in Carbide Create, you need to update to the latest version. So here is the 3D object that I created. Kind of just a tray. Could be an ashtray if this was 1975. But could be an accent piece to a piece of furniture. It could be a piece of trim along the edge of a room, something like that. This sort of idea jumps out. Someone on the forums put a spider on the front of a chair or a cabinet one time that was very much this idea. So this is the end result of just a couple of moves inside the software. Let me show you how I created this. So my basic design was a simple square with a circle inside of it. Just 2D items. I'll leave the tabs on there. I put those in later. I tend to put those in at the end of it, what it is that I'm doing. In the modeling tab, I like to create my stock so that I can understand where I'm at in space. So the first thing I do is make the stock of whatever it is that I'm trying to cut. So I go into the Create Shape or Add Shape, and I want to go flat. And then I've measured my stock. So it's 20.5 millimeters. And I like to call this the main body. And that'll be an add function. I'll hit apply and we'll show the 3D. And we're just looking at a block of stock. That's it. So we're done. We've got one block of stock here. Next, I want to create that cutback, that dish. So same idea, you select this time the circle, which I've centered inside of the square. Same model shape. This time I want to go round, and then I want the height to be 18 millimeters. Actually, I take it back. I think it was 15 millimeters. And we'll call this the round cutback. And this is going to be a subtract. So if we go ahead and hit apply, and we show our 3D, we have a problem. We've gone all the way through the material. And that's happened because of the angle of the round. So if your angle of the round exceeds the amount of stock available, it's just going to go to the bottom. What can you do with this? Well, you can limit the height and hit apply. Now I have a flat bottom. Except I'm not really looking for a flat bottom in this case. I'm looking for a nice round bottom. So what I want to do is change my angle. Let's go down to a 30-degree angle. Now we're changing the angle of the sides, the side walls. And you notice the effect here. We end up with a much smaller flat section in the middle of our round, but we still haven't gotten an entire round here. So what I can do is I could scale the height and eliminate the problems, hit apply. And now I'm going to get that angle and the depression, but I don't really know how deep that depression is. It's not 15 millimeters. I know that. It's not all the way through the material. So I can keep changing the angle here. I can keep going lower in angle and getting a little bit deeper cut into my material. And if I look at no limit here, you can see that I'm not hitting a flat with an angle of 25 degrees because I'm hitting in the middle at some point where 25 degrees meets. What if I go 28 degrees? Get a little bit more of a cutback. I think 30, we might not go through the material. 30 is not bad. We're getting a pretty nice deep dish there. And we haven't hit the bottom, even with no height limitation there. So if we want to limit the height, we can tell if we've gone past 15 millimeters here. And we have. We know that this is the 15 millimeter floor that we set on our 20 millimeter thick item. What if I want to go to 18 millimeters? Now I'm just going to leave 2 at the bottom, which is probably not enough to sustain it. But there's 2 millimeters. So at 30 degrees, we're pretty close to going through the entirety of our material. We're very close. So I think at 25 degrees is probably better. And we're going to leave some decent amount of material behind this cut. You can come and look at it back here. You can't really measure it per se, but you can look at it on the underneath side of the 3D to give yourself an idea of, are you clearing the thickness of your material? And I know this is a lot of figuring. This, again, is not parametric modeling. You're doing a lot of figuring with this artistic tool to produce the results you want. So now I've got to cut back into my tray, and I want to apply some art to this middle section here. The way I can do that is I can import an STL, or I can import an image. Here, I want to import an image. I want to import it into my circle. I want to define it as being inside of this vector. So you highlight the vector first. Go ahead and add the art next, the PNG here. And now that PNG is contained inside of the circle. The question is, how deep do you want it to be? So this is a 3 millimeter relief all the way across this distance. And what this red here is telling me is that that amount has exceeded the available stock as I've defined it. So it's above my stock piece of 20.5 millimeters. And this is not going to be created. It will not cut that. That is flat space that does not exist. And that's okay, actually. Sometimes that's all right if you lose the rim. And the reason you're getting that rim is because of the bright white surrounding the edge of your object.
Just to interject.
Yes.
My friend Jeff Thurston had added a question. So this is obviously, or not obviously, but this is a depth map that you're using, right? It's a PNG grayscale image for the artwork you're putting in the center.
Yeah, so here's exactly what I'm utilizing. Okay. Is this image right here. Perfect. Are we seeing Photoshop now? Okay, great. So in Photoshop, I brought this in, but there was a bright white line right up here at the top. And this end on the bottom here was not present. So I had Photoshop actually generate this bottom section. And if I take it away, you can see it's gone, and then it appears. Now, there are other tools that have similar capability to Photoshop where you can kind of finish off a shape. Then I output a PNG, and the PNG is what I brought into Carbide Create. So Carbide Create now has this image being brought inside of this circle. And I'll call this my image for now. And if we show the 3D, I don't really care much about this, that it's not going to get cut. That's all right with me. I'm looking at the relief here in the middle, and you're not going to be able to tell everything on a 3D depending upon how big it is. You're going to have to zoom way in and hope for pretty decent contrast and decide if that's enough detail for your project. And some of that's just going to be experience and experimentation. So I actually went with a 2mm relief. And that reduced my red area. I don't have quite as much being brought up into the not cut section. And everything else in here is only brought up to 2mm. But it's a nice organic shape. It looks like it might turn out pretty cool. So I went ahead and threw it on the machine. So this is the actual result, and this is done in poplar. There we go. And I went down to a 1/16 inch end mill for the tool pathing. And I'll show you how that tool pathing works right now. You notice the area that it was unable to create, it did do a little bit of a cut in here, kind of defined that edge, which I thought turned out pretty nice. If I wanted to cut that out, I could always cut around that inner contour, that circle that I'd use to import the image into. I could always just straight cut that out if I wanted. But this, again, looks more to me like something you would put on crown molding or on the corner of floor trim, something like that, or on the edge of a piece of furniture that you would do to, say, the arm of a piece of furniture. Let's go back to Carbide Create here. So once you've created your item and you're happy with this result, now's where Carbide Create's going to take an organic object and make it super simple to make. Looking at the tool pathing, I wanted to start with this inner area here. And all you have to do is highlight the shape into which you imported your 3D object. And you want to create a 3D rough toolpath. And that's right here on the 3D Pro, 3D Toolpaths, the Pro tab, you'll have 3D rough. And the 3D rough comes in, I used a 201 1/4 inch cutter. I sped it up a little bit in terms of its feed rate and its plunge rate from the stock values. I left the depth per pass exactly the same, the step over exactly the same as it comes in with the stock 201, running at 18,000 RPMs. Those are all basic settings. And I left 0.5mm. I like leaving that number. It's a pretty good number. It seems to leave just a reasonable amount of material for the next cutter to cut. Name your toolpaths so you know what they do. There won't be too many toolpaths in this project, but you'll see later there will be many toolpaths in another project. Hit OK. So that's our rough. And if we look at our simulation, we're just going to end up with kind of a cratered, layered mess here. And obviously, there's more than 0.5 in some areas. But even though I'm going to use a small cutter, I'm not too worried about that small cutter encountering a bit more than 0.5 of the material, because as it steps up, it has to leave 0.5 on top of the highest point of something. So you end up with some steps. Because my step over is going to be very, very small when it gets to the 3D finishing. So let's enable this one. This is a 3D finish toolpath. I used a 111, a 1/16 inch ball mill. And here is where you need to edit the settings. When you do 3D finishing, go down to 10% of the stock step over. So if I select the tool here, and I look at softwood, ball mills, 111, I get a 0.794 step over. That's too big. That's going to step over the entire width. You end up with lines across your entire 3D image. So if you ever end up with lines across your 3D image that isn't smooth, you haven't changed your step over. Your step over needs to be about 10% of that, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more. That's why I went 0.069, I think it was, or something like that, whatever the previous value was. Let's see here. Yeah, 0.065 millimeters in this case. My plunge rate was 400, and I went up to 5,000 and just cranked it up to 24,000 RPMs. Took a lot of time off the cut. I can feed it quickly and spin it quickly. I'm not really cutting that much material because this step over is tiny. So you're not putting a ton of stress on the cutter. long as you're not plunging it into very hard material extremely quickly with a lot of bite. So I called this 3D finish. And I have an angle of 0, which means it's just going to go right to left, right to left, right to left. I can change this angle to 45 degrees, let's say. And that will go at 45 degrees across the object once it comes in. So we'll show the simulation here. And you see it cutting at 45 degrees across the object and bringing in the details. I like to utilize beech. For my simulation, I find it has the best contrast of all of them. And I could really debate how much detail I'm getting here. So that was it. 2 toolpaths to create the object. And then I have my cutout, which is going to go around the outside here with 1/2-inch tooling, which is new. If you have the 80mm spindle, you can use 1/2-inch tooling. That's a lot of fun. I'll show you a video here in just a second. If I show my simulation now, I get my same 3D cut across, and then we're going to get a cut out. And there we have it. For my actual cut, I'm actually going to space my 0 point up into the stock physically in the real world so that these tabs have something to hold on to. If you were to utilize bit 0 here, and you were to start from the actual corner of your stock, you'd want to take your design and move it into your stock in the digital space so that your tabs had somewhere to grab. Does that make sense to everybody? More or less? Yeah. Okay. Saw a couple thumbs up. So there's our object, and there's our object right there. Came out just as expected. I like the detail of a 1/16. 3D for me, you can just let it run.
And what was the cut time for that whole project?
1 hour and 15 minutes, I believe, is what we ended up with. Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, about 1:15 here. It says 1:13. That was the estimated cut time on there. I did not time the 3D finish.
That's a funny thing to note. It's always the frustrating thing about 3D carving because you want to have as much beautiful detail as possible, but most people, including myself, don't want to wait all that long. The better the 3D outcome, the longer you're going to sit there and wait for your toolpath to finish. You'll probably want to use the smallest tool and keep dividing that step over in half. And man, by the time you get down to it, you will absolutely be sitting with your cutter for hours, but you will have the most detailed piece you've probably ever cut. So understand that that's the relationship. And if it shows you a long cut time, it's not wrong. It's usually pretty high. Oh, another good question here. How do you recommend to finish a 3D carve, like for post-processing once it's off the machine?
It depends on what material it is. Depends on what your goals are. People will do 3D carves in MDF. You're going to have a real hard time finishing that unless you spray it with some sort of sealant. Hey, Future Kevin here, checking in while making the edit for this video and thinking about where you could get advice on finishing MDF. Here are 4 people whose expertise I respect. All right, I want you to follow Bird Dog Creates, established 2019, and I have these links down in the description below. He does outstanding sign work. That's our buddy Darren. Go ahead and take a look at all of his methods. You can message him with questions. I'm sure he's happy to answer. He's a person that's done outstanding work. Next up, Nick's Fix Las Vegas. Also making a ton of signs, using MDF a lot. He'll have excellent recommendations. That's another Shapeoko operator, Nick Valencia. Outside of just the CNC world, Wildwood Creative by Lauren Bedard. She has talked a lot about her pricing, which will come up later in this episode, but look at her creations. They are outstandingly beautiful 3D creations utilizing a variety of materials. It's wild.wood.creative, all one word. Give her a follow. Also, Shelby and June Woodworking. Shelby and June is run by our friend Janine up in Canada. She, again, is an excellent sign maker doing a ton of different finishing. Follow those accounts, ask those creators questions. That's the expert kind of info you really want to go and access. Okay, back to the episode. You're going to have to seal all of that thing in because MDF doesn't like to take paint to begin with, even with that outer shell that it has. And certainly once you cut into it, you're really going to struggle to get it to not just absorb every bit of paint you spray at it and have a bunch of fibers stick up and it just turns into a horrid mess. One thing you can do is lightly sand it. I use a brush, like a hard brush, bristled brush to sand it. And you could put some water on it and try and brush off some of those fibers as well. 3D is kind of tough to finish. I think the harder wood you use with the fewer strands, the better results you're going to get. And like a lot of CNC, that's a woodworking question. That's not a CNC question, right? CNC creates the thing, but finishing and woodworking are a lot of the knowledge you need to have to get to probably what most of us would consider a successful project, is that finishing component. This certainly, if I were to take this for poplar and apply any sort of water-based finish to this, it would certainly get fuzzy in a hurry. If I apply something with oil, I'd probably go a better way to sealing everything rather than raising everything up. But I haven't finished a ton of these. If you do it in walnut or you do it in maple, you're going to get a lot less of that than you're going to get in a poplar or a pine, and certainly in an MDF. And that's just material based. If you do it in a composite, well, you get no problems at all. You do it in a composite, like an epoxy or any kind of compressed paper stuff, like a micardia, or what do we have? Rich light. Thank you, Will. Thank you for chiming in. Rich light. Too many things going through my head. Yes.
While we're on the topic,
yeah.
do you recommend doing multiple 3D finish with smaller tooling? So to start with the 16th and then go to a 32nd inch and, so on and so forth.
Sure. If you have time, certainly with a 32nd, that's a tiny, tiny bit. You're going to want to take a lot of the pressure off of that bit as you run it, even with the small step over. And remember, you can't get a ton of depth out of a 32nd bit. You're going to run out of shoulder. So that bit is only, I forget how long it is, but a few millimeters long. You only have a little bit of flute length before that thing goes into a shoulder to get to the 1/8 inch shaft that it has. This is actually done with a 1/32 to give you an idea of the level of detail you can get to. Little tiny teeth. And this is done out of hardwood. So the side was done with a 1/8 inch. And I did multiple sides of this object with overlapping corners to create all but the back and the bottom. And make something a little bit different. But that was a 3D image that I imported. So down to 1/32. You may find yourself not needing to go to a 1/32. And that leads right to my next topic I had on here, which is when to use the 3D tool. Like everything in CNC creation, you're balancing things. The size of your object, your desired level of detail, the type of stock. Are you doing wood? Are you doing metal? Are you doing a composite? Something like a rich light or a micardia? If you're selling these things, 3D carves are going to be very expensive. If they're of any size at all, you should be charging for your machine time. You should be charging for your machine time. There's a reason I said that twice. And you should also remember you are not your own hourly employee. You do need some profit in whatever it is you're doing. I see people out there charging $40 for custom engraved cutting boards. Well, the cutting board costs you $40. You charge nothing for doing anything to it. I could spend a lot of time talking about pricing with everybody. If you're selling 3D objects, they're going to have to be expensive if they're really going to pay off for you. Small objects are accents and trims. Like I said before, I think that's where this tool could really be a moneymaker more often, but also increase the value of a larger object because you add something eye-catching to it. I love the spider on the front of a chest of drawers. I thought that was super cool. They took one piece of their larger piece of furniture, did a 3D carve on it, and it turned out really nice. I would say also don't use the 3D toolpath on what could be a 2D project. That's another issue. We had somebody recently email in about cutting trays in 3D. And the tray was simply a circle with an inner circle with an inner circle. Well, you would cut that 2D. Don't spend the time going across it like that and up and down to just cut a 2D object. It's horribly inefficient. So it's a lot like the cabinet that's up above my desk here. I did a 6-foot cabinet entirely on the CNC. You can do it. It doesn't mean you should do it. Table saw or a track saw, far more efficient to make doors and things like that versus featuring those doors. I would make doors, make large objects for a cabinet on some other tool then I would feature those objects on the CNC. Now, if the CNC is your only big tool, then I understand. It's possible. And then everything's a hammer or everything's a nail and your CNC is the hammer. So that's fine. All right. Questions. Take some live questions about 3D, about the design process, about anything we've talked about so far. Do we have anything else in the chat?
There was one residual question about changing the angle. Like if you're doing multiple passes with different size tooling for your finishing, would you change the angle in between diameter of tool?
You could, but you should be getting the same result no matter what direction you go. Oscar will do this. Oscar in support runs a ton of 3D carves. We've had a giant 4x2 thing that he made on his 4x4. Pretty amazing. All the way from the frame and the outside, this ornate frame, into the image in the middle. All this comes with a caveat, by the way. I haven't done everything under the sun.
Also, to piggyback on that statement, a lot of things and a lot of questions that I've run into purely get solved by experimentation, grabbing a piece of stock that I've never used before, grabbing a little extra and throwing my tools at it like a wild man and just kind of seeing what happens. Really makes life a lot easier when you go in, with a desired product, because you've gone through all the trials and tribulations of what your tools will do in that specific batch of pine you picked up. You know what I mean? Like it changes from supplier to supplier. It's really worth the time and effort.
All right, here's there's an image for lack of being able to put it up there, but that is a 4-foot wide 3D carve. It took a massive amount of time for Oscar to get that one done.
Like 20 hours?
I think it was 20 hours. I think that's right. Let's see here. Some of the detail he was getting in his file. It's just crazy. It's really cool. You can really take that thing to the limits if you want, that 3D tool.
Other than that, I think those are all of our chat questions. If anyone has any live questions, feel free to sound off.
Yeah. Anyone, something's not clear or a specific question? Final thought on the 3D tool, just know what it's good at. Utilize it for that. If you want to go to parametric modeling, something like a Fusion 360, not awesome for organic objects. It's just not very much fun to try and bring in organic objects and apply those to a Fusion 360. You can, your skills would have to be a lot better than mine, that's for sure. And I think your skill level and understanding with Fusion have to be pretty high in order to effectively apply organic objects. This is going to help you apply organic objects pretty easily.
I did have one question, actually. Sorry. I saw something recently about where they had an STL of like an open book, and somebody was carving words onto the pages of the open book, and the book pages were like in a 3D carving. Can you import an STL and then apply an image like you did to the bowl in the same way that you were doing the image on the bowl? Can you do that to an STL as well?
Oh, that's an interesting idea. Can you carve into the STL? So you want to apply just to the pages portion of the STL text?
Well, you'd have to carve the book as well, but you'd also want to then be able to customize the text on the book. So if you've got if the book's laying open, so you've got like the 3D like shape of the pages, and then you want to apply like a customized text onto those pages. Can you apply an image of like a depth map onto the STL surface?
John, that's a fantastic question.
Yeah, actually, we fielded that on support a while back.
Thank you, Will.
And it can be done, but you need to arrange the text to flow along the shape of the page. And that pretty much requires a third-party tool which will set text along a path.
Okay.
Carbide Create doesn't have that feature. Doing it in Carbide Create is really tedious. So just import the book first, then export the auto tracing of the book as an SVG into something like Inkscape, draw lines there, or copy the lines off the edge of the top or the bottom of the page of the book, and then set the text along those curves, and then save as an SVG, bring it back into Carbide Create, and then subtract that or add it to the 3D model of the book using the 3D features in Pro, and you're in like Flynn. Bob's your uncle.
Thanks, Will.
Just like that. Just like that.
I'll go check it on the farm.
Has a file like that, you can send it into support or post it on the forums. We'll walk you through it.
I was going to say another thought here too, and just to kind of get your brain thinking about using multiple bits of software to kind of, take on one project. There's very handy 3D modeling software called Blender. It's free to use. It's very tedious to learn. However, you could take two separate STLs, you could join them together to make one STL, and then you could export that and bring that directly into Carbide Create. You could take an STL and then, go into a program like Fusion, create text, and then you could extrude that text and kind of combine those. So you could also consider it like, let me go ahead and create a 3D object that I want to carve outside of Carbide Create and then bring it into Carbide Create to then kind of apply Toolpath into it. So again, just another way to use multiple, pieces of software to kind of get everything that you want out of a project, I guess.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah, I think Fleming makes a great point with that. Again, kind of back to utilizing the right tools for the job is the issue. You need to figure out what the right software tool might be for the job. Good questions. I like that. Stuff that we can't necessarily 100% answer. Will, thank you for having the answer to that one. Topic 3, organizing layers. Whenever I'm learning something new, it's always beneficial to develop good workflow habits at the start, good technique at the start of something if you're trying to learn an athletic skill. Same thing here, because the more complex a project becomes for you in the CNC world or inside Carbide Create, the more organization habits you've developed at the start, the better your file is going to be down the road. Now let me share Carbide Create again here. So this is a cribbage file that I've made for an object, which I have here. Show you in just a moment. We'll go full size with that, but this is basically this clam contraption here. So with layers, you can organize a bunch of different elements inside of a file where you have a whole bunch of different things going on, especially if you're headed to do a flip job. So layers is the hotkey L and escape to get out. L brings it up, escape gets it out, and you can also grab it and move it wherever you'd like. You can make it a little bit bigger so you can see more layers on the panel itself as you work with the different layers and the different colors. I establish 1 to 3 regular layers for every file that I create, and I pick dark colors generally. There are a few light ones just out of necessity in longer files, but I like to be regular with those colors as well so that it's not terribly complicated to see all the different sections of whatever it is that I'm creating. And if you use the same colors, that'll help you remember where things are normally located. So I also make one layer, a tools layer or guides layer, where I have notes, I have elements I've used, I have previous elements that I've created off to the side that are never intended to be cut. I'm not going to cut them with a toolpath. I'm not going to cut them with a machine by layer toolpath. I'm just going to have some extra stuff along the way. I like to make checkpoints for myself so that should I mess something up in the middle of my design, I don't have to go back to square one to recreate the item that I'm working on, or the element of the item that I'm working on. We've worked hard to make layers a little bit easier to use here. So let me make this panel big. You can actually now, you can click on the lock and you can lock or unlock a layer. You can double click a layer and it will go bold, and that is now the active layer, and anything you create would end up on that particular layer. You can see that that's blue now. Inside that layers panel, you can appear and disappear any of those layers pretty easily. You can change the color by double clicking and selecting your colors here. And you can change the color at any time. It's not set in stone. You can also, via the right side 3-dot box, you can select all on the layer, and that'll help you sometimes adjust what you have on that layer or select things inside of a whole bunch of other smaller elements. As you can see here, I have little chamfer lines inside of the holes for the cribbage. It's a quick way to go in and select a whole bunch of something. So if I wanted to select just the dividers, I can say, oh, there's nothing on there. Hold on. If I want to select all the holes, I can select all on the layer. And now I've selected all the holes because they're all sitting on that layer. So you can use it for selection. You can use it for deleting things. You can use it for making things disappear like that if you don't want to see them. And you can lock them if you don't want to move them. Once you have an element finished, you don't want it to move. You don't want to grab it by accident, or you want to be able to use the selection tool across the middle and grab other things. You don't want to grab those elements, then you can lock it. So layers can be hugely beneficial. They can be much more simple as well. For instance, here. So this is that Formula One inlay I showed you earlier. This is the file for that. And if I wanted a chamfer around the outside, I would want to go into my layers. I would create a new layer, as I often do, and call it chamfers. And I like that rust color. That's a good color for it. And what I could do here is I can simply create an offset path, and I know that 1 millimeter is good for chamfering outside. Hit apply. Now that newly created vector is still selected. While it's still selected, I can simply hit L, click on that 3 button, and I want to move selection to layer, hit OK. And now that chamfer has been automatically moved to the chamfer layer, that path that I'm going to run. And I normally run something like that in a finished product. I will chamfer the outside of absolutely everything because it makes a big difference in the way things look. Looking at my toolpaths here, I have the female, which is the cut in and then the cut out. And I have one set of toolpaths that covers the creation of that female side. Because later I can simply disable that. I can go into my layers. I can take my default layer, in this case, my female side. I can hide it. And I can show my plug side. Let me hide my chamfer as well. And now I have my plug artwork already done, already mirrored, because that's what you have to do to create an inlay, is mirror your artwork. And now if I enable these toolpaths, it will now cut the plug for my inlay. So it's a pretty easy way to organize both sides of an inlay. And there you're only working with, in my case, 3 layers. We could rename this one. I'd probably call this the female. And I have 3 layers, 2 sets of toolpaths to create the plugs necessary for this object. So even in a fairly simple, from a standpoint of number of vector lines and number of toolpaths file, layers can be handy. And you can always look at them on top of each other if you want. But then I can start my cut from the same location also. I can simply replace my stock, because you're going to do one side out of walnut, one side out of maple, and I can go to that same XY point. I can set up a little known location on my machine. I can use the same 0 point, as long as I change the Z measurement or the stock thickness of my material, because it's probably going to be different. I cut one side, cut the other side. Questions so far on utilizing layers?
Just a quick note on layers and why this is really helpful for what you have brought up specifically. A big thing you have to worry about when it comes to fitting one thing into the next is sizing. So if you're able to construct your layers in a way where all that's living on the same exact grid, same exact project, you can take your original, I guess, female side, you copy and paste another, the exact same size of that logo, you flip it over, and half the work's already done. You don't have to sit there wondering like, oh no, is this going to match up to the previous project that I had loaded? No, it's an easy way to have multiple operations all in the same space, but at the same exact, scale. Because man, have I created 2 files and one was slightly larger, and man, does it suck to see that they don't fit. So layers can help with that quite a bit. We've got some questions here
Great.
coming in. First off, and this is just a general question on chamfering. With that 1 millimeter chamfer, what would you suggest using as a V-bit?
I use a 301 for my chamfering. And I use a 302 for all my inlays. But I like that kind of 45-degree edge of things.
And I think the way to think about it is you're doing essentially a no offset contour, and you're offsetting the line a little bit. Kevin offset the line 1 millimeter from his original vector. And the angle and the severity of that chamfer really comes down to the angle of the end mill and how deep you're going to go with that end mill. So in reality, you can use any V-bit you want.
Right.
It doesn't really matter all that much. It's just, you know, the math that goes into, all right, well, if I take this 90-degree V-bit, I go down 1 millimeter as opposed to 0.5 millimeter, you know, it's going to change that chamfer quite a bit. I will say that Carbide Create's preview is fantastic, and it will show you a very accurate representation of what that looks like. So simulate, adjust, simulate, adjust. It is worth the time and effort.
And go cut. Honestly, go cut. It's a big deal. If you look at this is chamfered with a 45-degree on both sides, on those edges, just a little bit. So I tend to use about a 1 millimeter offset to get that little flat point of a 301 off the edge of my material. And then I'll go down anywhere between 1.5 and 2.5 millimeters. If I want to do a cut in like this, I have a little cut in on the end. That's a 4.5 millimeter cut on both sides to create a little handhold to open up the cribbage board for everything that's inside. So chamfer and utilize V-bits for that, for stuff like handles. It's just an open single line vector.
Also, more of a personal question, but did you happen to put this F1 inlay on Cut Rocket, and will you?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet. Yes, I will. It's not there yet because it's part of a larger project. That was just a little test.
Nice.
That was just a little test. Let me share with you quickly a coin project here with some of the similar ideas. So this is a Los Angeles Lakers coin here, and it has 2 sides. It has one side that has the Los Angeles Lakers logo on it, and if you go through and enable disable, it has the other side that is a logo of the Lakers DJ. And if I go to the toolpaths, I have corresponding toolpaths as well. So right now, let me go back to layers. Let's get rid of that. And we'll show Lakers side because that's what we're looking at. You can see that these toolpaths are inside of the art that we're looking at right now. If I show the simulation, we end up with, by the way, in simulation, you end up with like a cut back for an MC etcher. This is not what you're actually going to see, obviously, but we had to represent the etcher somehow. And it shows the etcher cutting in to the available material here. So that's the Lakers side. And then I can enable here and disable there. And so now we're looking at DJ Richet enabled, but we don't have the artwork to match. We can go over here. And now we have the artwork and the toolpaths matching one another on the screen. So again, layers and toolpathing groups working together. And the more you name your toolpathing groups and name your layers, the more information you provide yourself here, the easier it is to understand when you come back and look at your file a month later, 2 months later, when you go to recreate something, the easier it is to understand whatever language it is you were speaking at the time. Now you might say, I don't want to make coins. Valid. But I like coins, not because I like carrying them. It's not an EDC item for me, but because it's a constrained design project. You got to do something inside of a small space. And also, making a coin in this manner, and I do have these files up on CutRocket, gets you in touch with flip machining something. And the idea of flip machining something doesn't have to be in its entirety as it is here with 2 sides of a coin. It could be, back to that cribbage file, with our cribbage file here, there are multiple sides to creating this entire thing. So first of all is the top main body and the top main body cutout. So this is the first thing you need to create. And this is very close to this thing that I'm holding in my hand. Can you guys see this as well if you look off to the side? So it's very close to this I'm holding in my hand, which I'm still experimenting with some epoxy. That's why it looks the way it does. But you have to create the top first. Then you have to go and create the bottom that's going to interface with it via those hinges there. Barrel hinges are my favorite. And then because the cards are as thick as they are, you're going to have to cut the flip side of your top and add the magnets, because that's what I'm using to connect these two halves when they're closed, to create the magnet holes so that you get a nice, secure close and clasp. So that's a flip machined object that's pretty basic. I'm just doing two items here, some magnet holes, as well as the hinge holes to create that clamshell. But that's a flip machine project where you have a pre-made item and you have to locate it in space and perform another operation. So looking at our Carbide Create again, when you're flip machining, you want to make sure that the edge of your object is on the edge of the point here, lower left, of your setup. And because you can use a bit 0 to locate the exact XY coordinates here. And then you can align your physical world top that you already made in this manner to your machine. And then you can go ahead and cut everything where it's supposed to be. In this case, that would be the backside cuts here. So right now I would disable this, disable that. That was our top main body we created. And let's see, top main body cutout. Bottom of top side is what I called it. And now you can see these shallow pockets here, as well as the holes for the hinges. Those are those shallow cuts. And here, this is a redo of it. So this is a single magnet rather than a double magnet. And it has that same 4.5 millimeter cut in with the 302. And so right back to the coin project, I'm trying things in that coin project that I then end up using in later projects, in ideas, in the way the toolpathing works. It even had me making a different game that didn't involve coins, it involved pieces. And I made the pieces a lot like I made the coins. But I had an idea to do that because I had made coins, not because I really wanted to make a whole bunch of coins and a bunch of money from coins or something. Questions, Fleming?
There was a great question. Let's see. Someone had asked if I'm understanding correctly, stock height is file specific and not layer specific, and we'll answer that well, but you're absolutely correct. Or stock height and your specific stock setup is always going to be specific to the piece of stock you are milling. If you're having two pieces of stock that are going to meet eventually, each one of those pieces should have its own specific.
Flip machining can definitely seem like dark arts.
Oh.
Thanks, Will.
Yeah, if you're gonna machine a plug and like a female side of an inlay and your walnuts, 1/2 inch, your other piece of maples 3/4, you want to make sure that you're machining to the right depth on both. So treat those like separate files, separate pieces of material, and always specify that your stock thickness is accurate. It's very helpful.
Right. I go back and change the stock thickness when I'm cutting the female or the plug, the female or the male in that particular scenario.
Exactly.
Yes. Yes, you do have to go ahead and change those. All right. Other questions?
Someone had asked for a flip machining video, but then Will was right on it to send it his way. So I think we're okay.
Perfect. Yeah, we have a number of videos covering a lot of these items, and I try and put things into a lot of the videos where I'm adding those things in since people turned up. So if you find yourself starting out making coins for no particular reason, and then you're doing some inlays, wherever that went, here it is, and you're doing inlays, you may find yourself doing cut-ins on a larger box and utilizing the same hinging mechanism that you utilized when you did the cribbage. And you might find yourself making coins that are actually pieces. And applying paint into the pockets that you've carved, acrylic G paints, and utilizing the same methods that you used on other projects. And you probably want to fill in that middle section as well as all those other sections with inlays. And then go ahead and locate this piece to flatten out everything once you have it inlaid. And hopefully you don't get it wrong at the very end after you spend all the time to make the stock, as well as making the dice from scratch as well. You might go down a rabbit hole. It might be fun, but this is an example of kind of the progression of things. It's where you could go.
Great question just came in.
Yes.
When it comes to indexing stock for flip machining, and take your cribbage board, for example, one golden rule is we never want to change the X and Y 0 point. You would like to keep that in the same point, as I'm assuming you want to flip your stock in relation to that point. So how would you go about indexing your stock? Is this like a big piece of stock? Like, what's your process for, changing or setting your stock up for the flip side?
For the flip side, you can actually cut something out and spend no time worrying about, is the machine set up properly for the flip job right now? There's a couple of different ways to go about it. You can set a known offset inside Carbide Motion. We have a video coming up that will detail how to set up a known offset where you can actually save a location in your machine. So a lot of you have 4x4 machines. You don't necessarily use all the space all the time. You could have multiple setups inside of your machine if you're making something regularly. Or you could have a known XY point where you could put a piece of stock into that, and you know that that point is dead on when you come in and set it. You set your depth, and you're all set to go from that exact XY location. There's a number of tricks when it comes to flip machining, and this is what I'm glad that question was asked because I've forgotten about covering that. You have to decide on a couple of things when you flip machine an object. Let's say I want to engrave the back of this, and I want to do something circular that matched back here. This is a nice square object, no problem. You have to know in the software, once you've created your item, am I going to flip it this way or am I going to flip it this way? And account for it in the software. So you have to know I'm going this direction rather than this direction. And believe me, I've done it where I made a specific shape. It's the lamp hanging behind me. And I flipped it both ways and ended up with nothing matching. But what I do then with other objects of, say, a circular shape, where it'd be very difficult to find the exact center of something that's already been made, and how do I flip it over and where do I put it? You do a flip frame. So you create your object, you do a square around it, and you center the object in your square. And then when you flip your object in the software, you flip it and put the corner of that square on your XY 0, and you flip your object in the frame the same, and you cut the back side of it, and then you cut it out. So you can use heavy-duty tabs, either in the middle of the object or on the top of the object. You have to manage where your tabs are in space, but you mainly want to know, am I flipping this direction or this direction? There's a video on flip machining. There's a couple videos on flip machining. There's a video on creating a known XY offset. There's a video on modifying an object, and the same things apply, having to create a known position of whatever your object may be in space so that you can then cut it. If I needed to cut this, for instance, I would go to a piece of MDF. I would make a program where my Z0 was in the center. I would center a circle that's just larger than my object around that particular XY0 in the middle, and I would press fit this thing right into the middle of that, and then I would cut it. That's how I do the coins. Let's go to the coins real quick here. Looking at the coin project here. If I wanted to cut just one, forget what the size of this is. And here's why I keep extra art. See all this extra art out here? Gee, I wonder what the size of this circle is. This booleaned item that I use for my work holding. I wonder what the size of this may be. Well, here's one right here. Let's throw it over here. Let's change our job setup to center. So our center point moves to the center of our stock. Hit OK. We know that that's the case now because here's our end mill. Here's our XY center. We'll take this object. We're going to align it. Center, center. So now it's right in the middle. And the reason that this little cutout's on here is so that I can get my tool or finger underneath the coin to pry it out later. But with this setup here, I could actually take this coin. Let me group all those. And I could center it on that object. And now I can cut this art right into the middle of an existing round, of an existing coin. Does that answer the question?
I believe so.
Okay.
I will say nothing makes you feel like a more accomplished machinist when you press fit something into your MDF and you can machine the other side of it. It's excellent.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My Nomad still has the coin set up on it right now. All right. A few hotkeys real quick. There's a list of hotkeys on our website. Fleming, can you drop that in the chat? Do you have the hotkeys by any chance? The shortcuts?
I believe you sent it to me.
All right, we're going to look for that and drop it in the chat. There are a bunch of shortcuts and hotkeys inside of Carbide Create. So we're here on the coin file. Thing I use a lot is the node editor. You simply hit N for node editor. And you got to hit done to get out. But if I hit N, I can edit all of these nodes. Once I'm inside the node editor, I'll use two more hotkeys a bunch. You can highlight a node and you can hit smooth and unsmooth so that it either becomes a right-hand turn or straight lines, or it adds some smoothing to it. And you can utilize the arms to adjust. Smooth and unsmooth works quite well when you're trying to fine-tune an object. You can also hit D. So that's S for smooth and unsmooth, D for delete. And you can actually hold the D down and click away nodes if you want. So node edit. And you can simply click those nodes away one at a time by holding the D. So those are S and D inside of the node editor, which is N. I use that one quite extensively. The R button is going to pull up the rotate. So you can rotate an object to any angle you want. And you can hit escape to get out of that. Layers we talked about. L, escape to get out. Also, you can use V and H. So vertical and horizontal. This is simply flipping an object. Horizontal, H. V, vertical. When you need to flip objects. You can utilize those hotkeys. There's a host of other hotkeys you can use or shortcuts. Can we find it?
Yeah, that's it.
It's in the chat. Perfect. Thank you, Fleming. So that link is in the chat. Go ahead and save that. That's not easy to find. Go ahead and copy and paste that one somewhere where you can find it later. And you can go through and pick off all the hotkeys that you want to utilize.
If there's one set of hotkeys I can suggest to get comfortable with immediately, it's group and ungroup.
Yeah, so great call. Great call. G
So
and U.
You select a bunch of items, you hit G to group that set of items together, whatever is orange and highlighted. You can select a group of objects and hit U to ungroup them. And man, getting the hang of those in the fly helps tremendously when moving large amounts of objects or moving just a set of objects around, especially when you're making toolpaths and whatnot. It's very, very good.
Great call. And you can see me doing it here with this series of items here in the logo. U ungroups everything. You grab them all, and G groups them. One other trick that may not have filtered down to you guys. If I drag down, I have to have the majority of something inside the window in order to grab it. You see there? I finally got that piece. If I drag up, it will grab anything I touch. And this is so useful when you're in the middle of trying to grab some tiny little vectors or certain groups of vectors next to something else. You could zoom in here and just grab one vector or two vectors versus grabbing the whole of one like that. Down grabs whatever you have in the selection window. Up grabs anything it touches. Huge thanks again to everyone for showing up here today and asking questions. That was great. Really love having you ask questions. Even if we don't know the answers, we'll go search them out for you. It gives us some place to go to continue to find where you are on your CNC journey. Feel free to reach out either in the Facebook groups, the unofficial Facebook groups, or in the community. Tag me either way. I'm happy to have the interaction and know where you guys are and what you want to know. Really appreciate you being here. We'll be back for another Carbide Create Live, either late this month or early next. I got to figure out how it fits in the schedule, but either way, look for it in the unofficial Facebook groups and on the community so that we can notify you and we get to have you here again to ask more questions and be a part of Carbide Create Live. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Fleming, for being here. Thanks to Will for participating, and we'll see you again.